Welcome to Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, or CXC 2021. Our 4-day celebration of cartoon art couldn't happen without our partner organizations and volunteers, to whom we are eternally grateful. CXC is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our annual festival is free and open to the public, but it relies on corporate and grant support as well as individual donors. We're grateful for their support. Check out the Support CXC link on our website to find out how you can help us create meaningful connections between the people who make comics and those who read them. Cartoon Crossroads Columbus acknowledges that the ancient ancestors of the Eastern Woodlands tribe, now referred to as the Adena and Hopewell cultures, inhabited the land we know as Ohio. Their descendants include the living nations of the Shawnee, Miami, Wyandotte, Delaware, and Seneca, Cayuga. We honor and respect the diverse indigenous peoples connected to this place where we gather. We hope you enjoy this event. Don't forget to visit our virtual expo at cartooncrossroadscolumbus.org and keep the conversation going in our Discord channel, which you can find at cartooncrossroadscolumbus.org/Discord.
Welcome, CXC virtual attendees, to this panel about the process of taking a strip that's been around for a long time and putting a new creative team on it. I'm here with Jules Rivera, who does Mark Trail, Jonathan Lemon, who draws Alley-Oop, and Joey Alison Sayers, who writes Alley-Oop. My name is Shena Wolf. I'm the Director of Comics and Acquisitions for Andrews McMeel Syndication. Sometimes I give notes on Alley-Oop, which I feel like is the part of the moderator bit where you have to disclose like your relationships so that people understand who you already know and who you've never met before. Never met Jules before. Super excited about this panel. So let's start off with little intros from our panelists. Jules, would you like to start?
Hey, what up, everyone? I'm Jules Rivera. I am an illustrator. I work on graphic novels. When I'm not doing that, I'm working on a little thing called Mark Trail. It's been around for 75 years. I just did the 75th anniversary strip for it, which was no small amount of stress for me. I swear I sweated that thing so hard. And now I'm just looking forward to taking on even newer, more intriguing and weirder issues. It's all about a comic about environmentalism, and at a time of environmental change and climate change, especially under industrial pressures, like it's so relevant.
Awesome. And we're going to dig more into that in a little bit. Steenz, would you like to better introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So my name is Steenz. I am a cartoonist and editor and professor. So I, like Shena said, I do the syndicated comic Heart of the City, and I also edit for Mad Cave Studios, amongst other smaller companies. And I also teach cartooning at Webster University here in St. Louis.
Joey, would you like to talk a little bit about what you're doing with Alley-Oop?
Sure, yeah. So I'm the writer for Alley-Oop. I work with Lemon on that, and we've been doing it for I think about 2.5 years now, if I'm counting correctly. And it's been really great. It's a lot of fun. A big challenge to take on such a long-running legacy strip and turn it into something that's a little bit different, but still honors the original creator.
And Lemon, what's it like doing art on something like Alley-Oop?
Very intimidating. It's been going since 1933, so in your face, Rivera. It's a little older than Mark Trail even. But I do have the capable hands of Joey. He's awesome and keeps me on track most of the time.
No fighting? No legacy strip clashing, only collaboration on this panel. So how did you get the gig? Let's start with Jules on that.
Oh man, so the story about how I got the Mark Trail gig, it's one that'll probably be a defining moment in my career. Basically, I got asked to work on Popeye's 90th anniversary by T. Faulkner at King Features. And I just thought, all right, cool. I got a one-time gig. I'm going to draw Popeye, and it's going to be fine. I was the only artist who drew Popeye surfing, because I was like, what the heck can I have Popeye doing? And write a comic that is some kind of like capability of mine. And I was like, hey, has anyone drawn Popeye surfing? And the editor's like, nope, nobody drew Popeye surfing. I'm like, yes. So I showed Popeye in like this kind of actiony kind of sequence, but also really funny too. So so that turned into the Mark Trail audition, where about a year and some change later, I get tapped by the same editor, and they're like, okay, so you did Popeye's 90th anniversary. That was pretty sweet. There's this older strip that we're looking to rehab because the other artist was, he was kind of, oh, this is so, I feel like he was having a hard time with the strip, and they were kind of looking to phase in a new artist. So then the guy, the previous artist, he got himself fired pretty quickly in a pretty controversial fashion that I don't even want to get into here. I'm just like, oh god, just Google it. But then I'm behind the scenes going, wow, what? I was just a kid doing stupid, audition for the comics. I just got told, okay, time to do the art test. And then the whole Fallout thing happens, and I'm like, that just felt like a sign. I took that as a sign from the universe. Like, now I gotta go after this thing, man. It just came available. I'm like, I gotta fight for it so hard. So, getting into Mark Trail just really meant just hitting them as hard as I possibly could with creating a kind of a pseudo nature strip. Well, no, not pseudo, it's a real nature strip, but like, an art test of my nature strip, which has gone, it's gone released now, but it was basically about Pablo Escobar's drug cartel hippos. And I'm like, if I don't come correct with this pitch, turn it in fast, hit them with these drug cartel hippos, I am not getting this job. So I just decided to do what Jules Rivera does best and fight for the gig. And I'm like, who's going to fight harder than me? Nobody. Not possible. So, yeah, that's how I got to be the Mark Trail artist. Like, some magical happenstance came along, and then suddenly I was in the fight of my life, but I'm like, all right, I'm ready for this. Here we go.
Lemon, Joey, I'm sorry that you have to follow Pablo Escobar's drug hippos, but how did you get alley-oop?
Do you want to start, Lemon?
Sure. Of course, my story is not nearly as interesting as that. I just got a text from John Glynn asking if I would be available to do some work, because they had a strip and the current artist writer team were retiring, and I said yes. That's it. Sorry.
That was thrilling in its own way.
A text message came and he said yes.
Joey?
It's all the delivery, man.
Yeah.
It's all the delivery.
And so I, on the other hand, I had built a time machine, and I hadn't really figured out what to do with it yet. So I thought about changing history a little bit, fixing some things. But instead, I just went back and ran into this guy, V.T. Hamlin, who was drawing a comic strip. And it's not like that, obviously. Basically, I just got a message from John Glynn as well, kind of out of the blue. John and I had been in touch about various things for years. And just, I had pitched different projects to him and worked with him on some different things, or never anything came to be. It was all just ideas, and he never really jumped at anything I had sent him. But we kept in touch, and at one point he put me in touch with Mad Magazine, the editor over there, and I did a strip for Mad for a long time called The Machine That Travels Through Time. So that was kind of like my practice strip, I guess, for alley-oop. But then, then it was in late 2018, I got this random message from John saying, hey, would you ever consider trying out to write for this strip? And I didn't know a lot about it, and so I did some research and just worked up a pitch, and it was a lot of fun to do. And I really had hoped that it would turn into something, because I love time travel and I love, humorous sci-fi is one of my favorite genres. So it was kind of a natural fit. It just worked out.
So I can actually, I work on the other side of that at that particular syndicate. So what I can tell you is that, we met in San Francisco like a million years ago, and I loved Thing Part. Like, that was one of my favorite strips, and it's so absurd and strange. And then Lemon does a comic called Rabbits Against Magic, and so it was the thing where like we knew that there was a fantastical art style that he could do, and so then that's kind of, for those who wonder why some people get random text messages and then some people have like long test processes. How did you get this gig, Steenz? Like, how were you approached to be part of the city?
So it's funny, whenever I'm asked this, I usually, say, well, Shena reached out to me and asked me what I thought of syndicated comic strips. And in my head, I was like, I've read them. But then I started thinking, oh yeah, that'd be really cool to, take a series that have been going on for many, many years and retool it for 2020 and beyond. And I was actually thinking and talking to Bianca Eunice, who is also a syndicated comic artist, about getting this gig. And I was like, I think it's because Shena has seen my work. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And Bianca was like, it could also be because people probably like recommended you. And I was like, oh, that's a possibility too. So so she reached out to me to see if I'd be interested. And at first I was like, oh, I don't know, because I'm notoriously really terrified of change. But then I did the audition process, which was really long and really, really fun though at the same time, because I really got to play with the method of syndicated comic strips, which is completely different than doing like a graphic novel or a single issue series, because you have so much more space to get a story across, and you just kind of have to like look at it differently, but after that audition process, I got the gig, and I've been doing it for the past year, and I hope to do it until my hands no longer work. So
don't say that. Oh,
well, my hands will never stop working, because in like 20 years we're gonna have like much better like cybernetic technology. So I'll just like switch out a couple of fingers as much as I can afford until I have a whole robo hand.
I can't believe that your long-term plan is robot hands.
Yeah.
So just so you know, it was a combination of those things. So like I was familiar with your work, and I also like, it wasn't just your comics work that I was familiar with. Like I was familiar with your editorial work, because comic strip stuff is so specific and so deadline focused, and it's really like workflow wise, it's not something that it's not a skill that necessarily translates from other parts of comics.
Absolutely.
So that was a big part of when I was thinking about like, who could I approach to do this? And sometimes with these sorts of things, like you'll have people who and you'll be like, I know this person, I know they'll be good for it, but stuff like that. But in this case, like your reputation definitely preceded you. So
that's such a nice thing to hear. Yeah. I mean, I always feel like I'm such a mathematic artist because I'm constantly thinking about like, how do I put this together in like a puzzle format? If I'm going to be doing something, A, B, and C, how do I get there in a certain amount of time and make sure I'm on track? So I'm definitely very deadline focused and very process focused when it comes to comics. And it doesn't just show in my cartooning work, like you said, Shena, it also shows in my editorial work. I like to keep people on task. So, I mean, one of the things that I like to say is I've never had a late comic book, and it's because I'm really focused on making sure that sort of thing gets hammered out. I kind of want people to see that not all artists are like the waspy kind of living as they please kind of people. Some of them are very rigid, like myself.
So what are the specific challenges of working with an existing property? Like, where are the places that you ran into roadblocks that you didn't expect, or what were things that were like pleasantly surprising, like not as tricky as you thought they might be? Let's start with Jules again.
I was shocked to find nobody bothered to give Mark Trail parents. I was like, okay,
Like
so
ever?
because I wanted to start with a family storyline, right? Because it made sense. I'm, coming in as the fourth artist in this lineage, and I wanted, contribute to this lineage and kind of build a bridge between what came before and what's coming up. And so I was like, all right, tell me about Mark's parents. He don't got any. And I'm like, wow, that was easy. I didn't have to worry about stepping on any canon or anything like that. I could just make up what I needed about Mark's family tree. And Mark's family tree was able to kind of establish why we've got a Mark Trail in 2021, and he's a millennial when the strip's been around for 75 years. I was able to just lock in place what the canon would be, and I'm just like, this is easy. He's just the fourth generation of nature dudes named Mark Trail. Like, why is this hard? And so it kind of expands his history and kind of makes all the other adventures, kind of line up, in time, so to speak. So that was great. Things that were a bit of a challenge, I want to say, was trying to find out really obscure history or really obscure artwork of older characters. Like we tried to find artwork for Cherry's brother, because Cherry Trail has a brother who is a fan of feral hogs. And he's based on a patient of my mother's who lives in Florida. My mom's like, my patient has a pig, because she's a home visiting nurse. So she's like, my patient has a pig, but this isn't a normal pig. And I'm like, Mom, does your patient have a feral hog? Because it sounded like a feral hog. So, yeah. So trying to figure out what Dirk looked like, I got nothing. So it's just like, let me just make him look like a couple of existing characters. And I know that there's definitely been a lot of kerfuffle over Mark Trail's look changing, because I gave him stubble and I untucked his shirt. And that made all the old OG fans go, ah! And yeah, I don't know. I tried to give him a more modernized look, because what do modern dudes hiking look like? They do not have the super buttoned up shirt like this, not unless they're like a cholo or something. They didn't roll like that. So yeah, I just decided to update his look a little bit, and that's where I caught a good amount of blowback. I wouldn't even say a good amount, but it was just enough to go, oh, that's blowback right there. Look at that.
Yeah,
whatever.
Same. I remember seeing that play out on social media, and just the horror that people felt at seeing a sexy Mark Trail. That was very upsetting to the world, apparently. Lemon, Joey, I know that you did not face the same challenges, but so the purpose of this panel is to talk about taking something that's been around forever and everybody knows about, and then bringing it into the modern age, because that can be a difficult transition. Just because when you have teams that are working on stuff for really long periods of time, you end up with things that feel the same. It's very hard to jump forward. So the way that Alley-Oop looks now, the way Alley-Oop is written now, it's very, very different from the last team. So what has that process been like for the two of you?
Well, I'll say that, one direction I got from John early on was just to try to take it in a new direction, to honor the characters, honor the archetypes of the characters and who they are, but to really try and do something different with it, which ultimately was not appreciated by the diehard fans. But it's been around for a long time, and it just needed to do something different. And so essentially the current Alley-Oop takes place in a different universe than the original Alley-Oop. So it's the same characters, but they're different iterations of them. And the original Alley-Oop does exist. They've guest starred in one story arc where the original Alley-Oop from the original newspaper comics was a character in the current Alley-Oop. but they're great characters and they're great. It's a great setup and a great idea, but we just were able to take it in new directions. And it's always, not always, but it's for almost all of its time, it's had the time travel element. But now we have them going into different universes and other planets and just doing crazy things, and it's a lot of fun. And I don't know if the diehards will ever really love it again, but that's okay. I think we've found a new audience, and it's a lot more relevant, I think, to the 21st century.
So visually speaking, we were actually given, well, I was given, the only brief was, as long as the characters are somewhat recognizable, I could do in any direction. I could go in any direction at all. So I did a few different samples, and John sort of picked the one he thought would be good to go with. And I think I was really intimidated because I consider myself very much a comics historian. I've written about old comics and being paid. So the weight of the legacy of Ali was on me. So I actually, when I first took this on, I literally read every single strip from 1933. It took me weeks to do. I sat there making notes and jotting and just being horrified at some of the inappropriateness of the times, and generally studying at great length what the characters were looking like and how they were changing at the time and what they did, and just visually taking in as much as I could. And when I first started, I told myself, look, I'm going to honor the way the characters look, and then it's going to evolve as I keep on doing it. It's going to slowly merge into something rather than this like straightforward change. So I don't think the characters look hugely different. The one I really had a problem with was Ula, which is Ali's sometimes girlfriend, who, as was common back in the 1930s, was drawn in a much more realistic style to, I'm assuming, be sexy, and she had much more of a natural, realistic looking body and face. And I definitely wanted to bring her more in line with the other characters. So there was some change there. The other thing was, there's actually two strips that we took over. We have Alley-Oop regular, and I think we've been showing some on the screen, Little Loop, which is the Sunday only strip, and that's very different. That's much more closer to my other strip, Rabbits Against Magic. I think those characters could quite easily exist in the Rabbits verse, as it were. So that's been nice to do because it's almost like another iteration of the Alley-Oop world.
And this one, Little Loop didn't exist in the older canon, so we've had to kind of come up with that whole strip, just whole cloth. Somehow we got tricked into doing two strips, but ultimately it's pretty fun. I like doing two.
It's just one, but sometimes they're younger. So for the people who are watching who are not familiar, Little Oop is about Allie has been brought into the modern age by Penelope, a scientist, and she is also a child, and then they have small modern world adventures, and then the regular storyline stuff continues on the dailies. And this was sometimes with Sundays. For those, if you're watching this, you probably have some familiarity with newspaper strips, but not all newspapers run the Sundays and the dailies. So when you have integrated storylines, it can be complicated to make sure that you are telling the same story in a way that is comprehensible across Sundays only or dailies only, or making them fit together in a way that isn't really redundant. Comics are very difficult. And this panel is about reboots and restarting old comics or comics that have been around and are getting like a refreshed view. Like, how does that work for you as the artist who didn't start this comic?
I actually love it quite a bit, actually. I always feel like I'm never creative enough to come up with my own characters. So I kind of like that push of, well, here's a starting, like here's a template to work with. And that's kind of how I visualize or how I see most of my projects where I am rebooting or changing something for a future audience. This is where it started, and how can we evolve it, you know? But one of the first things that, you know, I was concerned about when I first got it was, you know, how many people were already reading it and who are, you know, very connected to these characters. And I hope I'm able to continue to give them what they want from the comic. You know, I was reading it, and I know when you reached out to me, you were like, okay, do like 2 weeks worth of storyline. In my head, I was like, wait, I need to do a treatment first. I need to understand who these characters are at their core. And I think that was what made my taking over so successful, is that I did spend that time to really understand who these characters were at the heart, you know, pun intended. And I think that's what most people should do when it comes to rebooting something or revamping something, is you have to keep, you know, you come for one thing and you stay for another. And I think with Heart of the City, you come for the heart. You come for the great relationships that you make when you're growing up, the relationships you have with your parents or you may not have with your parents, all of those sort of changes in your life. Those are the things that people want to get out of this comic. And so even though it looks different and I may take it in a different way, and I may not do gags or current events, it's still Heart of the City at its core, you know?
Yeah. And how do you think about the audience? Because there's a lot of different audiences when you're working with something like this. And like, we're also, and we can talk about this, like there's going to be books. Like your version of Heart of the City will have books. So what's the audience that you have most in mind? Or do you have to kind of juggle that, like newspaper and online and future book? And, you know, like, are you writing it for yourself? You know, that kind of stuff. Who are you thinking about when you do it?
So, you know, when I first went through and read Heart of the City, I did also look at the comments because it's on GoComics. Why wouldn't you? And I see that, you know, it's a lot of people who have been reading it for many, many, many years, you know? So on the one hand, I really wanted to give that audience something. So that's why I oftentimes will reference things from what happened before I took over the series, because I want them to feel like it is still the same. But I also think about who's going to be reading it in the future and what are some things that they're going to want. And I think what future readers are going to want is what I want presently. And as I want these stories to feel eternal. I want these stories to feel like something that they can look back on and be like, oh yeah, like this has aged well. So I think of it less as what does the audience really want and more what is the audience going to appreciate 5 years from now? What are they going to be happy to see 10 years from now? You know? So that's how I think of it. I would love to know more about my audience though. That's why I'm like really looking forward to it coming out in book format, because like with my other comics, I can go to a convention and someone can say like, oh yeah, I got this book from the library, or a friend gave it to me, or I just picked it up off the shelf, you know? And I don't really see that with Heart of the City yet, because there is no book yet. You know, it's just online and in newspapers. So I'm really only seeing a portion of people who I know are going to read the book in the future. So I'm really looking forward to when it's collected so I can see the full breadth of everyone that's going to be reading the series.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right as far as you have not yet reached your audience in that way. There's syndicated cartooning is kind of a weird career for anybody to have in 2021. Is this something that you ever thought you would do? Is it something that you wanted to do? And I'm going to mix up the order this time, and I'm going to start with Lemon.
Put him on the spot.
The question being, syndicated cartooning, was it something I always thought I would do?
Did you is it something that you thought of as a career, or was it something you hoped you would end up doing?
Yeah, I was one of those kids when anyone who asked me what I was going to be when I grew up, I just said cartoonist. I was constantly drawing and being beaten up as a child for drawing cartoons. Then I got into more trouble when I figured out how to caricature. I probably could have done quite successfully in academia if I hadn't been busy doodling all the time. And I didn't have a plan B, so I just ended up cartooning. my way to success.
I know you were here. So to completely continue changing up the order, Jules, you're up.
You know, if I could go back, like even just 2 or 3 years in time and say, Jules, you are going to take over a 75-year-old strip, and it's going to be like those kind of pulpy things you used to see in the 2010s where they just bring this stuff back from the 40s and it's like, lobsters beat my face. That's going to be your actual job. I would not believe you. I'd be like, what? No, it's crazy talk. But I got Mark Trail because I had built up a really good amount of experience with doing another comic strip of mine called Love Jules. And Love Jules is a it's a web comic that I do. It's basically slice of life me-isms. That's what. Yeah, there we go. Meanness. If you want the slice of me that comes, into the comics world, there you go. I got you covered. Oh, yeah. So anyway, so that helped me at least build up timing and understanding how to do a 4-panel strip, because there is a certain timing to how to set up a joke or how to set up something serious or something dramatic or something really trippy and weird. There's just a certain timing that you have to master with it. And doing my comic that I was just doing just because, just to go, hey guys, here's a stupid thing I drew. Whee! I would just make these Love Jules strips, and eventually I got to publishing them into volumes. So, I got pretty good at it, and that's part of what got me noticed for the Popeye anniversary strip. It didn't come from nowhere. It was mainly because T. Fagner had seen me and was like, hey, 4-panel stories, and you can do action sequences. Because that's the other thing with Mark Trail. Mark Trail isn't, it's not like a gag-a-day cartoon strip where everybody's just kind of 5 feet above the camera, about 5 feet away, right? Like everybody's just like all kind of straight. And yeah, no, I'm expected to do a lot of very interesting action sequences. Already, I've already done a car chase. I've done a boat sequence where a whole bunch of boats exploded. Let's see, what else? Mark's been bitten by a python. Like a whole bunch of stuff has to happen to make it feel like it's an action strip. And of course I have to get good at drawing people who are punching things. See, perfect timing for two-fisted justice. Like my technique is garbage. I have to take boxing classes now. That's my life right now. So I had no idea this was going to be me, but at the same time, it's just like, of course this would happen to me. Of course this really weird, wild opportunity would come for me. And I'm like, yup, take me to your leader. Let's go. Let's do this.
Joey?
Well, I like Lemon, I kind of always wanted to be a cartoonist, and I was drawing from very early age. Some of my earliest memories are laying on the floor of the living room with the newspaper spread out and just reading all the daily strips, even the ones that didn't make sense, even the serialized ones. Probably read Alley-Oop, I definitely remember reading like Mary Worth and Kathy and, all the ones that didn't really have any relevance to a 6-year-old. But yeah, so it was kind of something I always wanted to do. There was a long period of time where I didn't pursue art, where I was just kind of doing it on the side and trying to figure out what to do with my life. But then I rediscovered comics. And for a long time, I did a weekly strip called Thing Part that was in like some alternative news weeklies. And that was sort of where I guess you could say I kind of cut my teeth, like similar to what like Jules was talking about, was like working in that really specific format. When you're doing a strip like that, you're bound by space and you're bound by panels. And so there really is a timing thing that takes a lot of work and practice to get right. So so that's where I sort of got my chops doing that. And so yeah, this is kind of a dream come true. But I have to say, when I was doing a weekly strip, I was like, wow, this is a lot of work. I don't think I'd ever want to do a daily strip. As much as I thought I did when I was a kid, I'm glad that I'm just sticking with the weeklies. That's the way to go. And then this came along, and I love it. It's great. It's a lot of work, but and we're doing something that just I've never seen anything like what we're doing, which is a science fiction comedy gag or two a day, with complicated characters that have, complicated lives and character development. It's so many things at once that it can be kind of overwhelming. But I think we're pulling it off.
Yeah, like the thing that I would mention, just as the person who is moderating, so sometimes that means I get to present context. Comic strips seem really easy to do because they're small. Like they don't have that many panels. You can't fit that many words into them. And so sometimes you'll get people who very successfully write humor and action in other formats, thinking that they can come into comic strips and do it very easily and that those skills will translate. And almost all of the time they don't, because it's really, really hard. Like it looks really easy and it's really, really hard. So those are all things to think about when you decide to become a syndicated cartoonist, when you look into your future and say, this is what I will do with my life. So was syndicated cartooning a thing that you thought about as a future career when you were growing up? Because this is a thing that changes based on the age of the people I ask it. But
yeah, actually, yes. So when I was younger, I mean, the first comics I ever read were newspaper comics. I mean, I was super, super into Jumpstart, into Kathy, into Ziggy, for better or for worse. I mean, Garfield, my homie. But yeah, I had always loved strip comics. And for a while, I was even like drawing strip comics in school, and I was drawing myself and my friends in like Calvin and Hobbes type illustrations. But I never really connected the dots between doing those drawings and having fun doing those drawings and making that a career. I just knew I wanted to keep doing those drawings. When the question of like, okay, well, how? It's like clouds and fog in space. I don't know. I like what I like, you know? And a lot of that had to do with, if you don't see anybody that looks like you doing that sort of thing, it never comes up. It was like never even an option. So I was never like my mom always says that when I was little, I always knew I was going to be an artist, which is like, that's very cute. I don't know if that's true, but that's very cute, Mom. But I had never thought like, well, I'm going to be a syndicated comic strip artist, or,
right.
I didn't have that specificity growing up because I didn't see that specificity, But I think if you like go back through my life and you can like see the little clues of this was always going to happen, every step that I took was like a stepping stone to get to where I am today. And it's kind of cool to like look back on it and be like, wow, I really did just want to do this. And it's like wild that it took so long for me to realize that this is something that I could actually do.
Do you have favorite storylines from your runs? Because I think you've all been doing, I think, a couple of years on each strip at this point. So are there particular, and you can't say the Pablo Escobar Hippo storyline, again, a different storyline, but do you have like favorites of things that you've done? Jules?
Yeah. I mean, I've only done 2 storylines because I've taken a really, really long time to just get a storyline going, try to figure out the rhythm. Each storyline of mine goes about, it's running between 4 and 5 months, and I'm like, I got to get better at winding these things out faster, because that's a really long time to be invested in a daily comic. But I mean, I'm really happy with how the like there was a boxing sequence I did. I'm so happy with how that came out. I'm like, yes, good job, good boxingness. What else? The car chase sequences. I'm like, I think I know how to do car chases now. Yay. The Florida sequence where everything explodes. I did a 3-week-long speedboat chase in Florida. All right. And you would think that, the readers would be like, heck yeah, speedboat chase in Florida. But, not everybody agreed. They're like, I don't see how that would make sense. Mark Trail has a reputation for blowing up boats, okay? And now we're nitpicking reality? Come on. So that has been my favorite storyline so far. Just, all of the different action set pieces that I can get away with doing. I felt like also with the first storyline where it's about Mark connecting with his dad, but then his dad also meeting his family for the first time because they've been estranged for a while. I feel like that was a really emotional payoff, you know, like people were really invested in seeing Mark and his daddy issues. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's a common refrain amongst millennials. Like we're having conversations with our parents and it's getting harder. And I don't know. I think it's good to explore things that are current in ways that are not just about the environment. And don't get me wrong, I'm doing that too, because on the next Mark Trail arc is going to be a very, very, very current issue that that is affecting us today. And if you read the Mark Trail strip, you will learn a little bit more about it. But yeah, basically, if you buy a Marimo moss ball, like, be careful how you get rid of it. That's all I gotta say. So yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of fun doing Mark Trail, and yes, it's a ridiculous amount of work. I write and draw it, but whatever. I mean, I'm like, this is still a fun job. Like, it hurts, but it's fun. Yeah, that's. I'm weird.
That's okay. It's good. Anyway, do you have a favorite storyline from your run so far?
Oh man. I really like the storyline where Dean is lying to his friends about how he is cousins with Keanu Reeves. I like those storylines because of how I came up with the story. Most of the time, a lot of the arcs are because I'm having conversations with my husband in the shower. This is just like a time for us to like talk and not be distracted by our phones, you know? And so like it's a really great place for inspiration. And as you know, we were I don't even know how I was talking about Keanu Reeves in the shower, but I just like started thinking of like, wouldn't it be funny if, oh my God, and then what if, and then what if? And so that kind of idea of like, how else can I make this even more and more ridiculous? Those are the kinds of stories that I really have a lot of fun with. So that one was really good. I also really like when Hart saw her dad again at the end of last year, because his character was like definitely something that she cared about in the original series. And obviously, I mean, she went to New York as like a 7-year-old, which is crazy to me, but you know, I wanted to make sure that that sort of thing was in the story still, because Heart of the City now very much feels like a story about change and a story about growth. And I think having her dad come in and not really be the best guy ever is a really great chance for her to figure out, well, what kind of relationship does she want to have with him, you know? Because it's not just like, oh, well, I have to have a relationship with him because he's my dad. You know, like I want to see like, well, at some point she's going to have to make that decision of, she doesn't have to just reach out to him because of that familial tie. You know, she has her own ideas and thoughts about those sorts of things. So yeah, I like the serious arcs, and I like the ones that are completely unrealistic.
I think there are a couple interesting things about like all of that stuff too. Like in the Keanu point, it starts in a very innocuous way. It starts because Dean hasn't seen the John Wick movies, and he doesn't want to look uncool. But then it escalates incredibly quickly. And then with the storyline with Hart's father, I think it's something that's really interesting about strips that have been around for a long time, especially when they get new creative teams. I don't think that that's how the story might have been approached 20 years ago. Yeah. Because I don't think that that's the kind of exploration of a familial relationship that people would be open to seeing in a newspaper strip. So I think
absolutely
there's so much stuff that you're bringing to this, and it's just really like I get to see like way early. I get to see the arcs plotted out, and so like for the stuff like Dean pretends he's related to Keanu, and I'm like, how is this? Like what in the world?
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I do that I'm not sure if other creators do. You tell me, but I write all of my stories many months in advance.
Nobody else does that. Like some other people do that, but most other people are writing them the week they're like supposed to be handing them in. Yeah, like I don't see roughs for everything. Like a lot of people I love how ahead you are. It's very nice. Lemon, Joey, do you have favorite storylines from your run on Alley-Oop so far?
Well, I just want to say I'm very familiar with what Jules has done to Mark Trail, and impressed partly because when I look at the comics page, there are very few strips that even bother having a background, let alone sophisticated art. I mean, there's Zippy, and then Alley-Oop is probably quite similar to Mark Trail in that we couldn't get away with not having a background. There's lots of costume changes. There's a lot of research that often goes on when Joey announces a new storyline, and I've got to go scampering to Google to look up to find out, just little things like the Boston Tea Party. There was a whole bunch of stuff, just getting those buckles on those shoes and the hats, and lots of buckles all around, really. But like everyone, I'm kind of lazy, so I do enjoy it when Oop is in space or in the desert, and the background is just a line, with a little pyramid or something. But we did go. Ancient Greece was a kind of fun one to research there. A lot of columns and things like that. And I dislike sandals, so please, no sandals.
They are funky to drop.
All those straps and bare feet.
I regret to inform you they're going to the sandal universe in the next arc. People wear sandals on their hands. There's these whole body sandals that they wear.
Hot.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I really enjoyed doing the writing the arc where every week they shrunk down smaller. So they started in the lab and they encountered this mouse scientist who shrunk them down to mouse size, and they progressively every week they got a little bit smaller and smaller until they were bug sized, and then paramecium sized, and then they got down to even the atomic level, and it went on for I want to say 7 or 8 weeks of decreasing size until they were literally the smallest thing that they could be. They were the size of a Planck unit, and then their next shrink, they shrunk so far that they ended up back in as the size of the universe. So that was kind of fun philosophically to play with, and it gave Lemon a chance to just draw a void. So there was a week or two where it was just a blank void, which was my birthday present to you. So that was a lot of fun. I like to write the things that aren't necessarily historically based per se. I mean, it can be fun to riff on a historical time period, but what's fun to me is coming up with something so wild and outlandish that it hopefully hasn't been explored before in other media, or that we I come at it from a different angle so that it just feels fresh and new. So that's why I like going to other dimensions and other planets, and just having fun with that.
So we've talked a little bit about this at the very beginning, but you do a lot of different kinds of comics work, and you also do a lot of work that I would say is like comics adjacent. So not necessarily all of your work is cartoonist work, but all of much of your work is around cartooning. How do those projects inform your work on comic strips?
Well, let's see. I mean, editorially, I overthink, I would say. I'm definitely always thinking about, well, how is this story going to make sense? I don't really put things out there like, that'll be funny, and then just kind of walk away. I'm like, it's funny now, but in what way is it funny? Let's talk about it. So I think I'm always really thinking about the whys and the hows when I am creating my comic strip, rather than just what's on the page and what's a funny thing to say, Right. And when it comes to education, so this is actually really funny, but I started teaching 3 years ago, and my final for my students was to have them do 10 strips of individual stories with an overarching theme. And then 6 months later, that's what you asked me to do to get this job. And in my head, I was like, this is karma. My students would probably hate me. But it's like really cool to see that this is actually something that you can learn to do in school, you know, to be able to understand how stories work, you know, that 3-act structure, really looking at what's in a panel and what kind of storytelling you can get in a panel that's not from dialogue, you know, what else is going to be in there to really tell your story. So all of that goes into my comics, which goes into my teaching. So it's all really together, you know. And I actually don't even really use my comics when I teach. I use other people's comics. I wonder why that is. Now that I think about it, I should be using my own comics. I have plenty to use. But yeah, when it comes to like teaching and editorial, I definitely like for people to understand the very basics of it, because I think if you can understand the very basics of cartooning, you can really build upon it. I think comics in general has a very low like entry level knowledge base, you know, but in order to be really good at it, you have to know how it works and why it works. And all of that informs everything else that I do. It's the how and the why.
Yeah, and all of those things actually make you fantastic to work with, because one of the things, well, it's so the process of getting a new creative team on an existing property is very different from the process of launching a brand new comic strip for a host of reasons. And one of those things is, you know, if you're starting from scratch, then you're learning how to do comics along the way. And usually if you're somebody who's been approached to take over a strip, you already know how to do comics. So now it's just like you're learning how to do this comics thing. And the thing that you said about the different ways you can tell stories within a comic, it's you see a lot of younger cartoonists who will do this thing where they'll have the text and the art telling the same story, or doing the same punchline, or like describing what you're seeing. And the thing that I always have to remind new people is you have multiple channels of information to convey this thing. And so you don't want to have two things saying the same thing. You don't need it.
Exactly. I mean, that's what visual literacy is, you know, you are getting information from something that is not words, but pictures. And I mean, I do that even when I'm, you know, I've been lately coaching novelists on how to write comic book scripts, which is really, really fun and necessary. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I have to keep reiterating to them, is that there are two forms of information, you know, the dialogue gives you one thing, but the art can give you completely something else, you know. I mean, anytime I think about that, I think of like, I mean, Nancy is one that really does it, the Nancy comic. Like, there's so much, not just in the dialogue, but visual humor that I think is absolutely incredible. And then sometimes it doesn't work at all. Like, cow tools. Oh my gosh. Like, what was he thinking? Like, I you know, I almost don't ever want to know what the big idea is behind cow tools, but the fact that so many people are like, I don't get it, is like, it shows that there's so much more to it, because then people start analyzing the panel, you know, like if the dialogue isn't telling me what I'm supposed to be looking at, then the picture should too, right? And if it's not that either, then it's like, what am I looking at, you know? So comics is one of those mediums where they have to work together, you know?
Yeah. And it's a sophisticated storytelling thing, not to get, I mean, it's not fancy. It doesn't have to be fancy, but I think that there can be the perception that comics are not complicated, and that's not necessarily true. Speaking of Nancy, so you guys did a crossover, which was
we did
like, so you have two rebooted strips, and being done by younger than the average age of syndicated cartoonists. How did that come about?
Oh my gosh, I think, I don't know. I think I was just talking to her and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if we just switched? And then we had like a video chat of all of the ideas for different ways that we could switch, and it all came out very naturally. And I really like when cartoonists and comic artists like understand that this is something that's a job, you know, like Nancy doesn't come out of nowhere. Heart of the City doesn't come out of nowhere. There's someone doing the work. And so having them switch is like even more like, just so you know, real people are doing these comics. But also I just thought it'd be kind of funny because I've never seen anything like that. Like I would love it if, you know, more cartoonists did that because it's just funny. Like, why wouldn't you? You already talk.
So I know that you all do other things. You work on other comics projects. You probably work on things beyond comics, but I don't know any about, like, I don't know about things that aren't comics. What are the things you're working on? Where can people who love your work find your other stuff and this stuff?
So I am currently working on a graphic novel called Side Quest. It is a history of tabletop role-playing games. It is also a semi-memoir. So me and my co-creator, Sam Satin, write about the history of tabletop games from as early as Han Dynasty China to today, and all of the things that have come together to create what tabletop role-playing games are. But also we put in a little bit of how RPGs have affected our lives. And I think it's actually really going to be very interesting because I don't really care for fantasy at all or D&D. But I also love other tabletop role-playing games. And there are other parts of that community that I really like. You know, I like painting miniatures. I like LARPing. All of that is a part of tabletop role-playing games. And I want more people to see that it's not just D&D. There's so much more to it, you know? So that should be coming out eventually. It's, you know, drawing takes a while. So I'm hoping that that'll be out in spring of 23. And what else am I doing? I'm also doing a bunch of like mini comics for myself. I like to do personal comics. They're usually very, very short because I like to do short comics. So I'm going to be trying to do a series where I like jump into a subculture that is not my own. I was talking to Shena about it earlier, but I just got into the Numismatic Society, so coin collecting. I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see what else I can find and get into. There's just something about like knowing a lot about a lot of different things that I just really, really love. Like, I don't want to like go to every year of like coin conventions, but I want to be able to talk to somebody and be like, yeah, you need to find the 2019 and 2020 W quarters because they're worth $25. Where else can you find me? You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is ohheysteens, and you can also find me on my website, ohheysteens.com. And yeah, also read Heart of the City.
Jules.
Okay, you can find my stuff on, if you go to my website, www.julesrivera.com, you will be able to find both my links to Mark Trail, but also the links to my graphic novels where you can pick those up. I have 2 graphic novels published through Turner Publishing. They're both sci-fi books, so, you know, yeah, right? Like, we could all be homies about that. Yeah, but I'm still going forward with publishing the Love Jules books. I'm going to start, I feel like I'm at the point where I can start compiling the 3rd volume, which is Love Jules Apocalypse Garden, which basically is a little bit the story of how I decided to take this whole pandemic mess and just turn it into a garden about it. And yeah, I'm very, very excited to share all of the things that I've got going on.
Lemon?
Yes, well, I drew another strip called Rabbits Against Magic, as previously discussed. It's been going every single day, never repeated since May the 12th, 2006. And it's been twice nominated for Silver Rubin. That's found at GoComics.com, the premier cartooning website. I'm on all the usual social media platforms, one of which shows some of my sketches that I do when I have fantasy spare time.
Joey?
Yeah, my other big project is I do strips for the Nib, which is a political comics site. I do a regular strip for them right now, and then I post stuff online. I post stuff on Twitter under at Joey Alison. But I don't, between Alley Oop and the Nib, I I don't have a ton of free time. I have a couple kids and and another job. So, and I also sleep once in a while. So I have to do that. But yeah, no, I kind of just put stuff out when I can. But these are my two major projects. Alley-oop is the biggest one for sure.
So I had some other questions that I sent out before this panel, but a lot of the ways that you've answered these questions have actually answered those other things. The one thing that I think is particularly of interest for this kind of panel, how do you think about your audience? So with newspaper strips, there's the editor, there's the newspaper, there's also the readers of the newspaper, and now there's the online readers. Like, who are you thinking about when you write the strip? Like, are you writing it for yourself? Are you writing it for these imaginary people? Like, maybe talk about that for a second, Jules.
Okay, so who I write for, I guess it's more of the attitude of what I'm trying to do, which is most of the time I'm trying to educate. So I think of the people I'm trying to educate and why. What kind of message am I trying to convey to them? What kind of natural message are they going to learn from this? Especially with the Sunday strips. I was the one who started calling them Science Sundays because nobody else had thought of that. And I'm like, this is like low-hanging fruit, guys. Anyway, with the Sundays, I'm always intent on educating people. And educating is all about all ages. So I'm thinking anybody from kids to grandma. It should be, and you should be able to show it to a kindergartner or to a grandma or anybody, in between. And you should be able to show it to them and they'll just look at it and go, ah, like seriously, if it wasn't for the Sunday strips, my mother would never know what I even do as a comics artist. But I consider that like my most family friendly thing. And when I get into the actual daily strips where the running storyline adventure goes down, I mainly think of the Mark Trail fans who, like me, back in like maybe the 2010s, were looking at this, this old pulp artwork resurfacing on the internet for the first time in like 70 years. And it's lobsters beat my face and flesh-ripping weasels. I'm gunning for the pulp audience, who is like a newer generation who like wants that kind of pulpy type entertainment. But, there isn't really that many sources of it. But also a little dash of people who like Ted Lasso. Like, if you are a fan of really nice dudes, then yeah, that's what's up. Like, I want to build Mark as like a really good example white guy for other people to look at and go, see, that's a good white guy. Be like Mark Trail. I guess that answers your question.
That perfectly answers my question. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to ask Joey next, but I will also ask Lemon because art is also storytelling. Joey.
It's hard. Oh, sorry. It's hard to have a specific audience archetype in my head because we're doing so many different things with the strip. But to me, the most important element of the strip is something that we brought to it that wasn't there before. It was like solid humor. So for me, the jokes are the most important. And, I've been writing humor strips for just so long that I sort of have learned to just trust my own gut about that. So I guess in a way, I'm kind of, if I make myself laugh, then I feel like I've done a good job. And then hopefully other people will enjoy it as well. So far, so good.
In terms of craft and technique, I do strive to create what I can do as much as I am as talented as I think I am, to create something which at least gives some kudos to the team that has produced Alley-oop over the years. I mean, back in the 50s and 60s, even, there was a whole team of people, pencilers, colorers, and inkers, and storyboarders and whatever, and now it's just me and Joey. So in some sense, and it's shrunk down, so we can't put the detail in. I've noticed when I've tried to hide some small details in the strip, they just get squashed out at some point when it comes out in the newspapers, and it's just lost completely. But I do have a lot of fun, and like in Little Loop, there's always a slug hidden in one of the panels, and we like to slip in lots of cute little details. If you're paying attention, you really want to look, you can often find little puns and things in the background.
Is there anything that you feel very strongly should be part of this panel that we have not gotten to talk about yet?
Can we
Jules.
talk about environmental racism?
Yes, let's talk about environmental racism.
Yes! Yay! So yeah, a big chunk of Mark Trail is going to start touching down on how environmental stuff only touches certain communities, and we're going to start seeing a little bit more of it, especially within the current storyline where we deal with an incredibly, horribly invasive species. Holy crap! This thing will absolutely scare you. It's like Tribble's, only 10 times worse and not as cute. Definitely not as cute. But I wanted to underscore these things because I feel like Mark Trail has always been on the cutting edge, and because in first inception of Mark Trail was what, 1947. Back in 1947, nobody was talking about nature conservation. We're all talking about, woo, we won the war, and then trauma. I mean, we haven't really, assessed the implications of, it's a nature strip. And so once I got a hold of that, I was like, wait a minute, this thing is modern. And as long as I can bring that kind of modern sensibility to Mark Trail going forward, I can keep this thing as current as things that, what's a current thing? I don't know. As current as TikTok. This thing won't age in like 5 years and be like, Jules, what are you talking about TikTok for? But yeah, I just feel like covering important issues like environmental racism and climate change. Oh man. I'm getting tired of writing strips about, hey, climate change did it. I'm getting tired of writing these strips, but I'm just going to keep doing it. Like, guess we're going to have to keep having this conversation. You guys won't listen about climate change. La, 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 la. Got to talk about climate change.
It's true. We're living it.
I just really love the kids in Heart of the City so much. I really hope that I get to, grow with them. And it'll be really nice to see where it goes, not just with their story, but also with my style of drawing as well. I had been doing more research on Jackie Orms, who is the first Black female cartoonist, and also on my arm because I love her. And I was going through her old work, and it's just like it's cool to see her style change, over time. And it took me until like last week to realize that people feel the same way about my work. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Heart of the City is going to look like in like 10 years. I'm so excited.
Are you the kind of artist who you like seeing your old stuff, or do you look at your old stuff and it's like seeing, is it good or is it bad? Because some people
it's bad.
are okay.
I don't even remember. I don't know the last time I even opened archival quality. I don't want to see it, but I do want to see what other people think about it. That's why I'm really looking forward to the collected editions, because I love talking to people about what they gravitate towards and what are some things that really connected with them. And I look forward to be able to have those conversations about Heart of the City.
Yeah, that's all fantastic. Well, I enjoy working with you on it, obviously, and I'm super excited to see what you continue to do with it, and just the process of going through this very the 2 week. I guess I should have talked about that at the beginning. How does one get this job? And it is 2 weeks at a time, or 2 weeks of roughs, where you try to tell a story with characters that you didn't create. You don't necessarily know that well. And 2 weeks is not a very long time to tell a story, and it seems really hard, but it's also a lot of work.
It is
doing a comic every day. It's a shocking, it's a weird combination of very strained and lots of work all at once.
Yeah, it's really interesting the whole process, really, because the process of when I put together a short comic is I write it all out prose style. I just write it all out, and then I start plugging it into a comic script. And it's kind of the same with the strips, but instead of plugging it into a comic script with page 1, page 2, so on and so forth, it's breaking it up into moments, and then those moments get turned into days, and then I have to take that moment and make a joke out of that moment, So it is very formulaic, but also it's a really good exercise in character building, I think, because you have so many restraints. And I think that if you are able to create a character within those restraints of 6.42 by 2 inches, one strip a day, then that says a lot about the strength of the character,
Yeah, absolutely. Lemon, is there anything you would like to talk about that we have not gotten a chance to talk about yet? It's okay if we've covered everything. That's amazing. Totally
I mean,
fine.
it's not that I can't think of anything. I can think of too many things. But no.
Okay.
Joe, please butt in.
No, I mean, I don't know that I have really much to add. I think, similar to Jules, I think we've been trying to make the strip be more reflective of modern society. We have, characters of color. We have queer characters. In fact, I explicitly wrote Penelope as being queer, and there's a couple other queer-coded characters in that strip as well. In the little oop, and then in Alley Oop, there's also, I don't know, I like being able to add that to that. I mean, as a queer person, it was a natural fit, but I didn't feel like that was necessarily like the most the most prominent aspect of the previous incarnations of the strip. So I wanted it to just sort of be more modern and more the way the world that I see, which is full of all kinds of different people. So I wanted that, to be like that, and not as homogenous as it was back in the old days.
I can think of no better way to end this panel than on climate change and creating a more diverse group of characters in legacy strips. So thank you so much for doing this, everyone. I know that everyone is busy doing comics and also having other jobs, but CXC, thank you for putting this on, and thanks to Jersey Drozd for doing the technical bit behind the scenes. And yeah, so that's it. I'm going to end abruptly and hope that he can make it seamlessly end in post.